right, this is our last program together. Throughout what I've done here, as you know, I've asked you to look at your own experience. I am convinced 100% that if we don't do that, if we read and remember, listen and remember, write notes and read them later on, if that's all it is, it's not going to do very much. There are certain books, certain talks that maybe we really need to take notes. We need to remember a manual on how to run a piece of equipment. I think it's a very good idea you remember that. This kind of subject matter involves a search, but that search is not outside of you. That search is in you, each human being. And please remember, so I don't have to repeat it again, I'm talking to myself and you. Just because I'm standing here doesn't mean I'm talking down to you, because I'm not. I am the listener as well when I'm speaking. So, watching, not just now, easy now, isn't it? Not easy in a traffic jam. Not easy when the children get ill. Not easy when your spouse is in pain. Easier to bear your own pain than someone you love, isn't it? Not easy. Worth it? Every ounce. Because in the end, I'm convinced it leads to the pearl of great price, to an unspeakable inner joy. It comes to us in moments, in flashes, in short periods. Theoretically, at least, there will come a time when we live in that joy. So we've looked at our experience. We've considered that spiritual intuition really means insight in the Theosophical terminology, and that insight is those moments where you get a flash of understanding. Ah, I understand. And every time that happens, with a principle now, not factual knowledge, every time that happens, you get a smile on your face and a little jolt of bliss, because wisdom and bliss are one. Then we suggested that the search for happiness that every human being goes through, from the time we're children, we're looking to be happy, aren't we? I think so. I was. Everybody I know seems to be. And I suggest to you that that's, in a way, the beginnings of the search for self. Because real happiness, lasting happiness, joy, bliss, are found there, not here. I'm reminded right now of something that, if I don't say it, it will slip out between the few gray hairs I have left. Krishnamurti was once asked by someone in the audience who had a kind of desperate desire to know, "Sir, isn't there a road from here to there?" And for once he answered it without saying, "You're asking a silly question." He said, "Yes, sir, there is a road, but it is not from here to there. It is from there to here." Think of that. Ponder that. And then your meditations will begin from there to here. So it is curious, perhaps, from one way of looking at it, but nonetheless a fact, that our consciousness, which is said to be what we truly are, the only thing that lasts, the awareness itself, tends to identify with where we focus within ourselves. Now, we can see this when we focus intensely in the physical body. We're not so much aware of thoughts, etc., etc., especially if you have a pain. It goes right where the pain is, doesn't it? And in a way, that's all there is that pain. Then we focus in our emotions. Sometimes people are so traumatized by something, they don't realize they've been shot until they collapse 3 minutes later. Focused in the emotions. We are the emotions at that moment. Isn't that true? Doesn't that ring true to you? You've identified with it. You are that. You don't say, I am my emotions. How silly. Nobody says that. But that's what is going on, isn't it? The same thing with the mind. You're absorbed in your work, in computer programming, like my wife. I think sometimes the apartment could burn down up to where she's sitting before she'd notice. You get so absorbed, everything else disappears, doesn't it? So the majority of us, at this stage of our human evolution, is focused here, in the solar plexus, the seat of our emotions, thinking, feeling nature. It's the me. Theoretically, evolution is moving us to focus here, which is not emotions, it's wisdom. The adepts, if I understand correctly what they've written, focus there. But not all the time. That's where they identify in what's been called higher mind, all those terms. The terms don't matter. That aspect of our mind that can understand, that's where they focus, if I understand correctly. When they are eating or writing a letter, they say they're just like you and me. Well, you know, not really, but they're like you and me in the sense that they're one-pointed in consciousness, and they wouldn't be aware of other things. They're human beings. In one of the letters many of you have read, Kutumi writes that his friend and student, Joel Kuhl, who lived nearby, had run his nose to blood, had an accident, and had a nosebleed. And he said, I was unaware of it. And then he says, why? Because I was not thinking of him. He couldn't do two things at once, focus on what he was doing and think of his adept, think of his student next door. So when we get that flash of understanding, I'm suggesting to you, for a moment, you're focused in that deeper state where truth itself resides. It's not enlightenment, but it's a flash of a truth. And as my mentor Fritz Kuntz used to say, for that flash, your mind is isomorphic with the divine mind, or at one with, or one form with the divine mind. There's a melding for that one moment, and the knower and the known are one. And then we talked about study, meditation, and service, how the three limbs of the theosophical life, as they've often been called, each one of them away from the me, isn't it? Doesn't each one of those take you away from the personal me? I know what some people call meditation doesn't, but it's not, from my point of view, meditation. Study takes you out of the me. Service clearly takes you out of the me. Meditation should go beyond the me. And from my point of view, if it doesn't, it's not meditation. It goes beyond the me, not to some otherworldly state, but to a deeper root of your own being. Search for the root of your own being. Not with intellect, with that longing within for the eternal. So when we're involved in doing something we love, we forget me, don't we? I told the anecdote about the folk dance group where the older woman, I used to dance with the older woman who said she had a really hard life and that's why she was such a good dancer. Because when she danced, there was no me. She was one with the music, one with the movement. All right. I'm going to let you ask any questions at this point, I suppose. I did promise you, so if anyone has a burning issue, and if you don't, you can email me.
Anyone?
Anyone? Yeah.
In deep meditation, when we let go, my ego sometimes takes hold. Do you have any techniques for getting back on track so that it is no longer the small me, but the universe and me, or the universe and I are at one?
Yeah. It's an excellent question because it's extremely common, and it happens to me as well as to you. When I notice that that happens, I'm aware of it. I let it go. All words connected to meditation are just, they don't do it. I try to become aware of a deeper universal reality that I've already experienced at some point. I try to shift the focus from that, say, to humanity as a whole. I read recently something which I've been doing for years and didn't know it was written, that if you want to get in touch with the adepts, that's almost how you do it, because they work always for humanity as a whole. Not individual, humanity. I don't know as I can put this in words, to tell you the honest truth. I think we just have to, each of us, try it ourselves. The secret is, and you hit on the secret, you become aware of the fact that the me has come in. That's the first step of dropping it, because when you're not aware of it, you can't solve the problem. So the very fact that you're aware of it means you've stepped back one little step already. Then see if you can make it deeper and just not allow that to come back. And if it does, don't say, oh, I did the wrong thing, because then you're making it stronger. You just let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. All right, now some very important, common blocks to insight. I call this the whole program Spiritual Intuition and Inner Joy, because the end result of it, the inner joy, is the end result of it. we're going to deal with two major problems that block insight in our lives, not just one insight. The first is crystallized belief. False learning is rejected by the wise and scattered to the winds by the good law. Its wheel revolves for all, the humble and the proud. The doctrine of the eye is for the crowd, the doctrine of the heart for the elect. The first repeat in pride, behold, I know. The last, they who in humbleness have garnered, lo, confess, thus have I heard. The doctrine of the heart is not the doctrine of the emotions. It is the doctrine of wisdom. So, I suggest to you, you hold your beliefs, theosophical theories included, lightly. George Arundel, who was one of the international presidents of the Theosophical Society, said, I hold my theosophy so lightly that I think I understand it a little. We have horror, dogmatic theosophists. The society prevents any one of them from forcing their views on you, though indeed they will try. But the open-minded person is not just the person who's open to any old idea who comes along. That's the wishy-washy person who doesn't have any ideas at all. They just take the strongest one that comes forward. The open-minded person will drop their own most precious belief in the face of evidence that disproves it. The closed-minded person will not be confused by fact. So, by all means, hold your theories lightly. Otherwise, there's no growth. When I know, can't learn. Truth itself needs no defense. When we get defensive, whenever I get defensive about an idea, a little bell goes off. Whoops. So when that happens, let the alarm be sounded. Just to sort of underscore this by something that Kutumi wrote, he said that the effects of alcoholic drink, while he did not approve of that, were relatively easy to get rid of as far as they were concerned. I should imagine even meat eating, though I certainly am a vegetarian. After all, they, on occasions, according to the literature, used Blavatsky's body, and she was, while she recommended vegetarian definitely, she was not a vegetarian. She didn't drink, smoked like a chimney, swore like a sailor, but they did use her body. So they were able to dispel the effects of the meat diet. Please don't anyone think I'm recommending a meat diet. I really do recommend vegetarianism. So they said that it was relatively easy to get rid of the effects of alcohol. What it was not easy to do was get rid of those crystallized beliefs. They didn't phrase it that way. But strong beliefs about God or whatever it was, they would keep coming back. The recipients of the letters often would come back, about God. They want to know about God. Well, the adepts reject an anthropomorphic deity. That's a story for another time. And they couldn't get their concept through because their beliefs were so strong. So while holding to reasonable theory, even then hold it lightly for further growth. Now the next thing, equally strong in its negative effect on intuition or insight, is reactive habit. We think of habit as things like smoking, don't we? Or wasn't it Johnny Carson who used to always reach up and touch his nose? If you ever see any reruns, I mean, you're going to see him do that at least several times during the program. It's a habit. Doesn't matter much. Smoking is a habit. Matters. It's not a good thing. But habits like that are fairly easy, comparatively easy to get rid of, compared to psychological habits that are in our subconscious. Now, as I said to you, the awareness of it is the first step. We don't realize that we're automatically reacting sometimes to people, to ideas. We're a little bit like a cat sometimes. You know, you challenge a cat and instantly. Don't you think that's a good image? I'm good at that. Not as good at it as I used to be. So, someone we don't agree with, someone we do not feel comfortable with, comes in. Watch. What do you do? I'm not saying we have to feel personal affection toward everyone. Even the adepts do not, according to what they say. So this idea of I must love everyone is sheer nonsense from my point of view, if we're talking about the personality. But this instinctive, animal-like reaction is something that blocks this rapport with the deeper reality within. It can be ideas. Sometimes I save myself by thinking of something very funny. You can't imagine what runs through my mind sometimes when I hear a talk that I don't agree with. I entertain myself all through it. And in my old age, I'm kind, and I don't say much except to certain chosen individuals later on. I must tell you an amusing story. Will Ross, which only the older members here would remember, he was a wonderful, wonderful, very knowledgeable, brilliant member of the society. Mary and I were out at Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where we used to hold the convention and summer school for a while, several years. And he was there, and Mary and I and John Aljo and his wife and Will Ross and his wife happened to have lunch together at the same table, and we had just heard one of those dreadful talks that was difficult to bear, you know. And Will Ross said, "In my old age, I've learned to abide fools, but not gladly." So we do need to learn to abide those we think may be fools. And of course, hold no personal enmity toward them. Difficult to do, isn't it? Now, we might just take a few seconds to think together, and we're not going to have anyone comment on this. See if you can close your eyes and think of some mental, emotional habit pattern that you have. You find yourself repeating it automatically. Maybe it's because of one individual, some idea that comes up, a politician. There's a good one. Do we react instead of being calm? Dora Kunz used to say, if you see a politician on the television with whom you disagree, do not get angry. Think of what you think is right. That's not easy. The habit pattern is thinking of what is right is calm, firm, strong, peaceful. So take that little exercise with you right now. You might think of something you do. If you discover it, then see if next time you're about to do it, you don't do it. Or you catch yourself midstream and come back to the harmonious self. Now, Sunita read a quote this morning that I have also. This afternoon, rather, not this morning. And I was going to say that the following statement from the Mahatma letters might help us to better understand how long it takes to succeed in all of this. But the adept says that the process of self-purification is not the work of a moment. What I'm asking us to think about and try to do is not going to be accomplished in a moment. It may actually take a lifetime or lifetimes. So we need to give ourselves a little time, have a little patience. And the reason it's going to take so long is because of psychological inertia. Mental, emotional inertia. We've set up patterns. That's energy, isn't it? We can't just say, Om, it's all over. Because it isn't. When you notice it, it maybe slows down slightly. If you've been doing it for 40 years, can you really think it's going to be over in 2 minutes? But as the Chinese are said to have reported, to remove a mountain, one begins by taking away small pebbles. I mentioned that meditation is an important way of getting more insight in life. Because right meditation, which is not any particular method, right meditation from my point of view is learning to quiet the mind and learning to focus the consciousness as deep within as we can to the universal, to the eternal, to the infinite, to the real, and identify with it. The more often we do that, the easier it is to do it. That's why I recommend every day. Because it's a little bit, the principles of this universe seem to run through the whole system. There's physical inertia, emotional inertia, mental inertia. And to develop anything, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, we work against something that opposes. To strengthen our muscles, we have to work against gravity, don't we? We have to lift something, pull something. If we didn't do any of that, the muscles would atrophy. Mentally, we know we have to be challenged in order to develop the mind, don't we? If you just twirl batons or play football all lifetime, I don't think you're going to develop your mind very much. Nothing wrong with twirling batons and playing football, but it's not going to develop your mind very much. A little bit, maybe. So, but emotionally, we don't see it. The difficult people in our lives are often the greatest opportunity for growth. We want them to grow. But as Dora Kunz used to say, when you have a difficult situation with another person, the first thing to ask is, what in me must change? That's not asked very often. Meditation is defined by HPB as the inexpressible longing of the inner self for the infinite. And if that's your goal, you're not going to go wrong. If it's a personal goal, it ends personally. If it starts from the emotions, it ends with the emotions. If it starts with the mind, it ends with the mind. In your meditations, I suggest you never stop to say or to think, I am now Atma Buddhi. That's a distraction. Krishnamurti defined meditation in this way, and I find both Blavatsky's statement as a goal and Krishnamurti's statement as the essence of meditation to be 100% true. Meditation is a process of emptying the mind of the activity of the self, of all the activity of the me. If you do not understand the activity of the self, then your meditation only leads to self-deception. Your meditation then will only lead to further distortion. So to understand what meditation is, you must understand the activity of the self. And that includes thought. We used to have a bookmark here, maybe we still do, and it was, meditation is not what you think. A pun, and a good one. You could think peace, 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 peace from now till eternity, and you might as well think Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola. It's not going to do anything. Be the peace. Radiate that peace. Reach others with that peace. You can do it. I'll tell you something that happened at the New York Theosophical Society a few years ago. I was doing the meeting that night. Like most of your groups, different people do it each night. I had my turn. And someone was there as a guest who I discovered gave God daily advice. Anyway, she took great offense at something I said. And in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have phrased it the way I did. I let my strong feelings about the idea come out. But in any case, she became very animated and angry, and the room filled with it. And immediately I knew what was happening. So I got very quiet. And when she finished her tirade, I said, "Do you think you've introduced peace into this room?" And she was stunned into silence. And I said again, "Do you?" Silence. I said, "Let's meditate." It calmed everything. If I'd gotten angry, there would have been a fight, you see. It wasn't a question of who was right, who was wrong. It was a question that was anger introduced to the room. So you can be effective. The meditative process allows you to do something like that. Mostly you just react. We, not you, we, I, you, all of us. But if we learn to center within more and more and more, when something like that happens, immediately you're quiet. So in your meditations, after you learn to quiet your mind, if you haven't already, and many of you are meditators just as I am, you can learn then to empty the mind of the me. You don't do it by force. You do it by being aware of the thought, aware of the me that comes in. And then you say, oh, not bad person. Oh, I see. Let it die, let it die, let it die. By focusing, if you need to, by focusing on nature or something for a moment, anything to let that die by itself, you see. Sometimes I think it's helpful in that aspect of the meditation to think like we did with the space meditation. That takes you out of yourself, doesn't it? And to identify with that which always is. See if you can get a sense of eternity, not time, not endless time, eternity that never changes through all the surface changes. There's a line in the Dhammapada by the Buddha, which in Buddhism sort of centralizes the teachings of the Buddha as the Sermon on the Mount summarizes the teachings of Jesus. As a tree with strong, uninjured roots, though cut down, grows up again, so when deep craving is not rooted out, suffering arises again and again. This is a law, not laid down by a god. It's a fact in nature. Discovered first, apparently, by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Taught ever since. Unlearned ever since. Sigmund Freud said that Siddhartha Gautama was the greatest psychologist who ever lived. And he was right. Now, we've looked at the belief idea. We'll try to be aware of strong convictions that block future understanding. We've noticed within ourselves psychological habit patterns that are destructive. We're going to try to be aware of those in the future. Change ourselves by dropping those things without becoming wishy-washy. What else can we do? Probably more things than I've ever dreamed of. But here's some suggestions. Don't let the mind be idle if you can help it. Don't the Christians have a saying, something about idle hands or the devil's work or something like that? There's a little truth in that. What happens when the mind is idle? It starts thinking of our problems. Well, maybe you're thinking of pleasant things, but the mind goes off. It's sort of wasted time. Those moments when the mind is idle, like waiting for a traffic light, walking, waiting for the computer to reboot, washing dishes, any moment when the mind is not active, make that shift within yourself to the eternal. That works. If that's difficult for you, use a mantra. Oh, hidden life, if you want. If you come through a Catholic tradition, the Hail Mary, or the Gloria Patri, or whatever you like. I'm sure there are those in the Jewish tradition. My Jewish friends can give me a few, I'm sure. That principal one, who knows? The one that's in the Masusa. Lord God, King of the Universe, something, King of the Universe. I can't remember how it goes. I should have learned it before I came. But there are in every religion those things. It takes your mind then more toward the spiritual, you see? So you use those idle moments to reinforce the harmony within. As I said, meditate daily. If you're new at it, not more than 5 minutes at a time, because your mind isn't going to let you. Gradually it will increase in time, up to maybe 15, 20 minutes, which is roughly what I do every day. But some do it more, some do it less. It's not the amount of chronological time, it's what you do that counts. You'll find plateaus in meditation. First thing you may notice, I feel more peaceful. And then eventually there may be that shift in consciousness where you become aware of a deeper reality within that's universal. So your meditations will change over the years. As I mentioned in one of the sessions, mine now is almost 100% abstract. But it wasn't that when I started. None of them are wrong or right. So give it time. Know there will be plateaus. You go along and you think it's not changing. And then one day there's a leap. And a new reality is born. And whatever we achieve in meditation, there will always be something deeper. Never think, this is it. Never think, I've got it. Because the moment you say that, you haven't got it. I do that often in my meditations. I don't use words. But there comes a tremendous peace. There comes a joy. There comes a sense of the eternal. And the me wants to say, I've got it. And the intent always for me is beyond this, deeper than this, more than this, always beyond this, never reaching the end. Ultimately, it is said theoretically, it leads us even beyond the human state. Pure theory to us. But it does lead to deeper states of awareness, without a doubt. So, the final quote is from Blavatsky again. In his hours of silent meditation, the student will find that there is one space of silence within him, where he can find refuge from thoughts and desires, from the turmoil of the senses and the delusions of the mind. By sinking his consciousness deep into his heart, he can reach this place. At first, only when he is alone, in silence and darkness. But when the need for the silence has grown great enough, he will turn to seek it, even in the midst of the struggle with self. And he will find it. Only he must not let go of his outer self or his body. He must learn to retire into this citadel when the battle grows fierce. but to do so without losing sight of the battle, without allowing himself to fancy that by so doing he has won the victory. That victory is won only when all is silence, without, as within, the inner citadel. Now, why do I suggest we do all this? It is not for personal happiness. It is for the world. Thank you.